Title: Primordial Pulse. Year: 216,666,666. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac series, 2025. Chapter 1. The Dust Eater lived inside the shell. Not a home, not quite a tomb. It was a labyrinth of vents and ducts deep beneath the ancient spires of Seraphics. A city that hadn't drawn breath in millennia. Air filtered through stone lungs, echoing like whispers in a mausoleum. He alone kept it clean. The ash-lunged prophet came without warning, her robes stained with soot, her words heavier than air. You do not protect them, she rasped. You contain them. The Dust Eater flinched. The shell had been his burden since boyhood. No one above knew the true cost of their clean air. The cage you built for protection, she continued, may now be your prison. He didn't answer, but something cracked. Chapter 2. In the scroll vaults of the shell, the Dust Eater found forbidden blueprints. The air system wasn't designed to protect Seraphics, it was meant to keep something in. His bloodline, his breath. The Prof explained the truth in fragments. Centuries ago, his ancestors absorbed the wasting plague, binding it to their bodies. They became living filters, sacrifices, and tomb for the city's survival. But he had never been told. Now, his body failed. The filters corroded, and the plague stirred. The Prophet offered a choice. Release the truth and risk the city, or die quietly and keep them safe. It was no choice at all. He began writing the truth into the vents themselves. Chapter 3. The people of Seraphics heard his final breath like a thunderclap. It came through their vents, in a voice once silenced. I was your shield, not your secret. They wept, then rioted, then built altars. The Dust Eater became a martyr not for dying, but for choosing to be known. The ash-lunged prophet vanished. The stories of her now flowed with every gust of clean air, and beneath the fractured sky, children played in air that no longer carried sacrifice, but memory, because some cages are broken not by force, but by a whisper wrapped in ash, and the will to open the door from within. Title: The Last Accord. Year: 216,025,640.8. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac series, 2025. Chapter 1. In the ebbing twilight of the forgotten coast, where the ocean murmured secrets in the shell-crushed sands, a woman emerged from the horizon, barefoot and blood-warm. They called her the False Healer, though none knew her name. Legends stitched from sorrow said she could turn back time one scar at a time, but none who sought her ever returned unchanged. The Cancer sun glowed low in the sky, not bright, but burdened. Beneath it, the last accord convened a whispered gathering of visionaries, outlaws, and one who carried no name, only a purpose born of silence. Her breath was soft, but her presence loud. She walked among them like a question never asked. She met the stranger who remembers a cairn of bones, each one etched with names that no longer belonged to the living. He spoke first. "You're not early," he said, "but you are in time." "For what?" "The fracture," he whispered. "The one we choose, or the one that chooses us." A tremor passed beneath her feet. Stars blinked in alarm above, and with that, the False Healer was bound not by chains, but by choices too long postponed. Chapter 2. The accord was not a place, but a pact. Each voice gathered swore silence, not to protect secrets, but to listen for what others missed. Risk was the price of progress, and she had been called to pay. Through salt-rimed canyons she walked beside the stranger, whose memories leaked like cracked vessels. He remembered wars before they began, betrayals before they brewed. He remembered her. "You were once the one who refused," he said. She did not answer. They passed settlements choked by order, their people numbed by peace purchased too cheaply. In one, a child held up the locket and said, "Do you remember my father?" The stranger bowed his head. The False Healer took the locket and inhaled. "I remember now," she whispered, "and that is enough." That night, they lit no fire. Only the stars spoke. "You may forget the moment," he murmured, "but the stars remember each decision written in silence." She closed her eyes. The fracture neared. Chapter 3. Atop the fractured mesa of silver and the last accord unfolded. Each member spoke, not with mouths, but with memory dreams bled into stone, sealed by oath and marrow. The False Healer's turn came as the clouds tore open above, revealing not light, but the void. From it poured visions of futures unchosen, tyrannies avoided, triumphs never tasted, children unborn, each one a cost unpaid. She raised her hand not to swear, but to sever. "No future worth keeping grows in fear," she said, "and no accord holds if it does not risk itself." From her palm, she pulled a thread of herself a memory locked behind her ribs. That choice she never dared make. She offered it, and the mesa drank deep. The stranger who remembered stepped forward. "Then it is done." Below them, the earth did not crack, it healed, and the accord, once fractured, held fast. She walked away not as the False Healer, but as the first remembered. Title: The Sound That Split the Stone. Year: 215,384,614.8. Era. Primordial Pulse. Author. Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Before the fall of the southern span, when empires clung to coal-stained maps and fear bloomed louder than love, there was a singer they tried to silence. The lark of liminal waters did not sing for quarter or coin, but for fields torn apart by battles none remembered starting. Her voice was banned from record, her name removed from ledgers, but still her songs echoed in kitchen walls and cradle cloth. With her walked the exiled champion warrior stripped of title after refusing to burn a village for glory. Half loud enough to undo the wall shame built across generations, the lark told him as they approached the climb. He laughed, and they began. Chapter 2. The mountain path passed through a city built on denial. Murals glorified victory, parades beneath whispered the truth. The lark stopped at each gate, sang the names history tried to forget. Children wept, elders turned away, but no one stopped her. The champion faced his former comrades on the ridge of banners. They offered forgiveness if he'd forget. Redemption is not erasure, he said, stepping past them. The lark sang louder. Together they reached the altar of oaths, where only liars had ever knelt. They stood instead. Chapter 3. At the peak, lightning etched memory into stone. The lark placed a braid of river grass on the summit. This is for those who drowned in silence. The champion carved no name, only a space so others could inscribe their truths. As they descended, the wind carried a laugh, not cruel, not empty, but whole. It echoed across the valleys where old soldiers now planted wheat, and singers taught their children. For shame cannot thrive where courage breathes freely, and every choice to speak, to sing, to step forward becomes a path others may follow without fear. Title: The Grief Singer. Year: 215,743,589.5. Era. Primordial Pulse. Author. Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the vale where no birds sang and no echo dared repeat itself, a melody drifted from beneath the earth. It was not song nor scream, but something in between, an ache with rhythm. This was the realm of the grief singer, a myth wrapped in mourning, bound to a forgotten fate. They came to her when voices failed them, leaders, lovers, liars alike, not for healing, but for remembering, for it was said that her songs unwrapped what the heart buried too deep. No one knew her name, only the weight of silence that followed. She dwelled beneath the mirror cavern, where reflections lied, and whispers begged to be forgotten. Among the stalactites she listened, until the voice behind the mirror spoke. You still grieve, it said. I do. And yet you sing, to keep from vanishing. That night the stars blinked in unfamiliar patterns, as though composing a new constellation, one shaped by sorrow, and lit by hope concealed in pain. Chapter 2. A message arrived, scrawled in soot and sealed with bone. Come to the hollow of breaths. The accord falters. The grief singer left her cavern without a word, only a hum that shattered nearby icicles as she passed. The world had grown afraid of expression. Art was text. Dreams were rationed. Those who dared imagine were marked unruly. But creativity is a current, and it found tributaries even in stone. She met the voice behind the mirror again, this time in flesh, cloaked in veils of sound. You are the last, he said, the last spark in a world of smoke. And I will burn, she replied, so others may see. Together they ventured through forgotten libraries and muted theaters. In each they sang back the ghost of forgotten artists, each note a memory, each harmony a rebellion. And as her melody returned to her lips, the voice knelt before her. This is how innovation begins. Chapter 3. At the hollow of breaths, where air grew thin from secrets kept too long, the griefed singer stood before the tribunal of the silent ones. They ruled not with law, but with fear of the unspoken. Their leader, veiled in ash, pointed to her heart. What truth festers there? She stepped forward. Only the kind that would set you free. And then she sang not a hymn nor lament, but a new creation. Her voice danced with paradox, pierced through denial, and spun tales of futures imagined by those long silenced. The air quivered, a mirror cracked. One of the silent ones wept. In that instant, creativity unraveled the cage. Thought returned to the dreaming. The world remembered its hunger for color, and the grief singer, now unburdened, walked out not with applause, but with echoes reborn, truth no longer smoldering, but shining. Title: The Light Beneath the Ash. Year: 214,102,563.5. Era. Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. They said the laughing hermit had lost his mind long before the fire claimed the valley. He lived alone in the shell of a collapsed bell tower, chuckling through conversations with ghosts only he could hear. The Keeper of Ashes didn't believe in madness, only in different kinds of memory. Her arrival was quiet, and her steps left no mark on the soot that coated the mountain pass. He found the hermit tending a fire pit, one ember still pulsing. Soulstone shines brighter when it chooses to be seen, he said, not looking up. She didn't answer. She simply sat, and for the first time in years he shared the fire. Chapter 2. The village below had long written off the tower and its inhabitant, but rumors grew, of laughter echoing down the wind, of the flame that never died. One by one, villagers climbed to glimpse it. Some came in mockery, others in secret hope. The keeper said nothing, but she offered each visitor a place by the flame. Not all stayed, but none left unchanged. The hermit offered stories, not warnings, but riddles. Children returned with questions instead of fears. Patience was the ritual, time was the offering, and slowly the ash grew fertile. Chapter 3. On the longest night, a storm rose, fierce enough to wipe out the path. The Keeper of Ashes stood guard beside the flame while the hermit stared into the dark and whispered names of the forgotten. At dawn, they emerged, covered and silent. The villagers, gathered below, watched as the hermit walked among them. His laughter soft but true. They didn't ask why he'd returned. They built a circle of stones and added a single lantern. No one claimed ownership, because some lights shine only when welcomed, and change, like soulstone, gleams best when no longer hidden alone. Title: The Memoryless Wanderer. Year: 213,461,538.2. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. He arrived at the crossroads of mists with no memory, no name, and a map inked in salt. Locals called him the Memoryless Wanderer, not out of scorn, but reverence. He did not speak, yet he listened so well the silence felt like a revelation. Beneath Cancer's watchful moon, the earth trembled not from power, but presence. Something sacred stirred in him, a desire to know not who he was, but what was hidden. This was the domain of the last born of summer, the codename whispered only by the desperate and the doomed. A woman in blue silk met him by the singing well. Her voice was the wind between secrets. He forgot more than most will ever know. He nodded. She pressed a stone into his palm, warm and etched with fractal lines. This is your first memory. Guard it well. The air thickened. The watcher stirred. His journey inward had begun. Chapter 2. In the ruins of the Atlas Sanctuary, knowledge was currency and surveillance was scripture. Every step triggered echoes of forgotten truths. Every corridor twisted by the paranoia of those who once ruled there. The wanderer moved through it like water in a broken vase, fitting everywhere, belonging nowhere. The last born of summer revealed herself at twilight, cloaked in faded glory and regret. You come seeking knowledge, she said, but some truths sever more than they sow. He placed the stone on the altar. Then let me bleed. They searched forbidden archives encoded in pollen, memories buried in beeswax, truths that could only be accessed through shared breath. In the candlelit vaults, he saw visions of what he had once been, a spy, yes, but also a guardian of forgotten wisdom. I erased myself, he murmured, to protect what matters. A thorn nodded. Then you are ready. Chapter 3. Infiltrating the obsidian spire required more than stealth. It demanded trust in the unknown. The wanderer moved alongside the thorn, each step calibrated by forgotten instincts. Inside, the librarians of silence guarded humanity's most volatile knowledge. How empires fell, how peace was faked, how people were turned into shadows. They posed him a riddle not of words, but of feeling, vulnerability. He bared to his heart what little remained of it, and let the truth seep out. I remember nothing, he confessed, but I know what is worth remembering. And with that, the seal broke. The knowledge flowed not to dominate, but to enlighten. The world outside felt it, a ripple across every curious soul. The thorn wept not from sorrow, but from release. And the wanderer, memoryless no more, walked out into the world with a mission reborn, to scatter sacred truths like seeds, and let those brave enough bloom. Title: The Choice Unwritten. Year: 212,820,512.3. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the drowned remnants of the Varlo Coast, every newborn was given a path etched in song, stitching, quill, spoken and dream. The child who never grows was meant to be a symbol, mortal by decree, their appearance unchanging, their names spoken in all rites. But symbols cannot choose, and symbols cannot love. The lark of liminal waters, born of wind and rebellion, sang a forbidden melody one twilight that made the child weep. To choose truly, the lark whispered, you must reject who was chosen for you. And so, beneath a moon that blinked like an eye, half closed, They fled together toward the climb. Chapter 2. They journeyed through villages that held the child's statues and shrines, leaving gifts at feet that no longer fit the one they fled. The child wore a hood and learned to ask questions instead of answer them. The lark taught silence a symphony. In the grove of echoes, the child broke a ceremonial flute once carved in their likeness. The tree shuddered, but did not strike. They found others wanderers who'd shed roles in the written myths. They listened not to command, but to conversation. The climb welcomed them not as relics, but as raw intentions made whole through honesty. Chapter 3. At the summit gold banners awaited. Each bore a name, a role, a title. The child set them ablaze. The lark sang, not of rebellion, but of beginnings. The two harmonized a song without conclusion, only choice. They kissed beneath ashfall, not in defiance, but in declaration. When they descended, they returned not as savior and siren, but as self-chosen stories. The people below did not kneel. They lit lanterns, and in that glow, no one asked who the child was meant to be, only who they were becoming. Title: Primordial Pulse. Year: 212,179,486. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac series, 2025. Chapter 1. The smiler beneath the hood never wept, never faltered, never stopped. Not because he was strong, but because stopping meant listening, and listening meant breaking. They called a ghost myth, cautionary tale. A man who crossed the dead barrens with nothing but a flame carved into bone. He had once been a healer, then a soldier, then something the world no longer had words for. But the echo of a forgotten star called to him through dream static, speaking in ancient lullabies encoded in radio static. A memory of a world that had not yet died. You do not heal to return, it whispered. You heal to become unrecognizable to your past. He burned that into his skin. Chapter 2. Every city he crossed was a test. In Kari's vault they demanded proof of loyalty. He gave them silence, and a child rescued from the ash flake. In Ten-Door Hollow, he faced a mirror of his old self. The soldier, the one who had betrayed peace for safety. He bowed before it, then stepped through. The smiler never explained the scar that shimmered with constellations. But when he met the echo at last trapped beneath the glacier city of Numa, he knelt. The echo said nothing, but placed a hand over his chest, and every pain he had buried bloomed like a sunrise behind his ribs. He did not cry. He exhaled. Chapter 3. The smiler returned not as a man, but as the memory of what humanity could become. He seeded the flame, fell in every village, left fragments of the echo's voice in wells, on wind chimes, carved into walls where children would ask what they meant. He never stayed long, but where he walked, the barren cracked and flowers followed. And beneath the fractured sky, people did not speak of miracles. They spoke of a man who smiled at ruin and whispered stories of stars. Because he did not heal to go back. He healed to become the future's answer to the past's worst questions. And he never looked back. Title: The Fire That Said Thank You. Year: 211,538,461.1. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac series, 2025. Chapter 1. The wandering monk kept no name and asked none in return. He traveled with a cracked bell and vowed to never settle until he found someone who thanked him first. In the swamplands of Verlaith, he fought back a sickness by boiling herbs no one else believed in. He vanished before sunrise. In the cliffs of Doolan, he rebuilt a skull with 3 fingers and half a prayer. Again, he left without waiting for applause. Then came the thorn-gilded Atetuis, archivist and maker of poetry that bloomed beneath the skin. She caught up to him under the stone pines. Victories mold your form, she said, but it's the fights that define your fire. And then, softly, thank you. He stayed. Chapter 2. They climbed the cliffs of kinship together, marking milestones with carved sigils and whispered reflections. The monk shared stories he never told before of battles won without joy, of kindness given without return. The thorn-gilded marked his arm with ink that glowed only under moonlight. A fire curling into the shape of a hand held open. Gratitude is not weakness, she said. It is a map to all you've carried and all that's carried you. At a village where his name had become myth, they gave bread to every stranger. He wept quietly and stayed another day. Chapter 3. At the peak of the climb, they found no shrine, only a flat stone with room for 2. The monk placed his cracked bell there and struck it one final time. The sound did not fade, it echoed back, a harmony of all the voices who once held thanks inside them but never knew how to say it. The thorn-gilded traced her fingers along his shoulder. You stayed, she said. He answered, not with words, but with a new vow of presence, not passage. They descended hand in hand, ready to teach others what it means to burn not just for justice, but for joy, and every thank you from that day forward lit the sky a little brighter. Title: Primordial Pulse. Year: 210,897,435. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Gate That Hungers was not a metaphor, it was a wound carved into the sky. It devoured solitude and spat out echoes. Many tried to seal it. None returned. Then came the last thorn of summer. A girl with broken shoes, a satchel of chalk, and a voice trained by silence. She didn't arrive with warriors or machines. She came with stories. She found 5 strangers, each from rival enclaves. They didn't speak the same tongue, didn't trust, but when the gate rumbled, she looked up and whispered, "The storm is not against you, it is the sky remembering your name." And she drew a line between them, in chalk, a beginning. After 2, they followed the chalk, not because they believed, but because it kept appearing, in every ruin, across broken bridges, on the bones of forgotten machines. Each piece revealed something essential. A hunter found mercy, the healer remembered anger, the builder wept, and the gate loomed closer. The girl, never named, taught them to combine voices, to build rhythm where before there was only clamor. When they reached the gate, it opened not in fury, but in recognition. Inside was no enemy, only themselves, mirrored and multiplied. And waiting, she took their hands. They stepped through. Chapter 3. What returned was not 5 strangers and a girl, but one story, woven from the threads of many hearts. They spoke in all languages, now songs born from shared silence. The enclaves listened, then followed. The gate that hungers still stood, but it no longer devoured. It hummed. And beneath the fractured sky, people etched chalk lines in sacred spirals, to teach children that beginnings are small, that harmony doesn't bloom from sameness, but from courage shared in motion and storms. They were just sky remembering how to say your name together. Title: The Fire of Letting Go. Year: 210,256,409.8. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The scarred envoy had never known rest. He was born into conflict, raised on failed treaties, and marked literally by every negotiation that broke under silence. His newest assignment sent him to the climb, not for war, but for witness. His orders were unclear. His burden was old. At the border town of Grelin, he met the sleepless midwife, who helped souls into the world but never managed to sleep through the night herself. They watched the stars together, saying nothing. One night she whispered, "To forgive is not to forget. It is to set fire to the chain you carried too long." He nodded, and they began the ascent in silence, with ashes trailing behind them. After 2, the climb brought storms. Rocks split, paths vanished, each setback reminded the envoy of names he had failed. The midwife didn't comfort. She simply endured beside him, her eyes heavy, but never closing. "I ruined monastery." He left behind his ledger of grievances. She buried it in salt and herbs. "You're not that boy anymore," she said. "You don't need to carry what they made you prove." In return, he stitched a new sash from torn peace flags and laid it over her shoulders. "So you know someone sees you," he said. She smiled, and for the first time in years slept. Chapter 3. At the summit, the beacon stood cold, waiting to be relit. They fed it no oil, only stories, sorrows, failures, joys kept in silence too long. The flame caught. Its light was not bright, but steady, unwavering. A promise that presence mattered more than perfection. They didn't return with answers, only warmth. In Grelin, the children listened differently. The soldiers asked different questions. And the next envoy arrived, not with orders, but with offerings. Because resilience isn't just survival. It's the invitation to rebuild with bare hands and open hearts. Title: Primordial Pulse. Year: 209,615,384. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. They called her the hunger that wakes, but she had no appetite for gold or blood, only truth. And in her city truth was illegal. 1,000 eyes watched, every word, every heartbeat, every deviation. But she moved like smoke. Her real name was a rumor. Her face, seen in reflections. Her legend, stitched into graffiti like a secret hymn. You are a prophecy disguised as a person. Someone had once told her. She believed them, even as she cracked safes not for riches but for records, buried truths, hidden evidence. She didn't steal for rebellion. She stole for transformation. Chapter 2. Her next target was in a vault. It was a man, the last of their kind. A prosecutor who once burned entire families for emotional deviation. He had vanished years ago. Now he preached healing. She didn't believe him. But when she entered his sanctuary, she found no guards. Only books, real ones, and a circle of people laughing softly, crying freely. He recognized her, didn't run, just said, "You've come far, but not deep." She drew her blade, then let it fall. Some part of her had already changed. Some prophecy was already walking, and it no longer needed to cut. Chapter 3. She never returned to thieving. Instead, she turned herself in, told every secret, named every name, and the city flinched, then breathed. They made her a criminal. She became a myth, but not for violence, for growth, for shedding skin the way trees shed bark so something larger can grow beneath. And beneath the fractured sky, children traced her path in ash and salt, not to worship her, but to remember that even crimes, when carved from compassion, can lead to redemption. "You are a prophecy," they whispered, "and so am I. Let us walk accordingly." Fatal. The weight of every step. Year 208,974,358.6. Era. Primordial Pulse. Author Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Bone-Break Bride had been legend, myth, and menace. They said she shattered her own legs to defy a binding marriage, and then walked anyway. Years later, her steps were sure. She carried a lantern filled not with fire, but memory. Her path crossed with the trickster who remembers, a former con artist turned contrition seeker, whose riddles now carried more truth than mischief. They met at the route crossing a fork where every traveler had to choose between speed and service. Each step along the long road is what carves who you are becoming, the trickster said. The bride nodded, and together they chose the harder path. Chapter 2. They passed through lands abandoned by comfort villages rebuilding with nothing but borrowed hope and broken tools. The trickster shared stories, sometimes shameful, sometimes instructive. He apologized often and was believed sometimes. The bride helped rebuild a bridge with her lantern tied to her chest. Children danced in the glow, unafraid. At the cleft ridge, they encountered a group of wanderers hoarding supplies. The bride gave them her last meal. True freedom, she told them, asks you to answer not just for yourself but for those who follow. They left the ridge emptier, but lighter. Chapter 3. When they reached the peak of the climb, the view revealed no horizon, only fog, and the faint outline of a trail descending. The trickster grinned. "So the joke is that it never ends." "No," said the bride. "It just keeps asking who you want to be next." They planted her lantern at the summit, not as a beacon, but as a reminder. As they turned back to descend, travelers behind them had already begun climbing. Some carried burdens, others bore stories, and every one of them stepped where the two had once walked, guided by the responsibility that freedom lit in their wake.